Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. To get you sort of value and entertainment out of these videos, all I ask you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. What I've talked about a lot in my videos over the years is obviously the global macro picture. So obviously we try to take a focus on Canadian what's happening in the Canadian economics, Canadian housing in particular. But the reality is, and I think everyone that watches this channel is well aware that Canada is such a small little piece of the pie, where in reality we're so much heavily influenced by outside factors. And so, for example, we can look around today and we can see that globally housing markets are all moving higher, and it's it's a global property market, and that's because when we have to look around as the financial markets are so intertwined. And when you have, it's the same thing for central banks, for example, right? So the Bank of Canada basically follows what the Fed in the US does or what the ECB does over in Europe. And we basically import their monetary policy. And so, one of the things you have to look for example, is if we're ever going to have a housing bust in Canada, which certainly seems overdue, that's going to come to fruition due to an external event. We're going to basically have some sort of mistake over in Europe or Japan or the US. There's going to be some sort of crisis that then stems through into Canada. So you have to kind of look at the bigger picture. And so one of the things we've talked about in this channel is about financial repression, where central banks are coming in, they're eliminating free markets. They're basically buying out all sorts of unlimited amounts, basically, of government debt, corporate debt, anything to basically keep the system alive, solvent, and to sort of keep that Ponzi going. And so one of the things I want to highlight this week is some recent comments this past week from the ECB's Madame Lagarde. She is running the European Central Bank, former head of the IMF, Madame Lagarde's comments right here.
Mario Draghi never got to hike rates. Could you imagine being in the same position?
We shall see. Future will tell, as the song would go. I would certainly hope that the economy is going to pick up, that there will be a turnaround in the months to come, and that we will be able to resume our sort of less exceptional monetary policy going forward. But I'm not seeing any kind of raise in the near future for sure.
Madame Lagarde, what are markets exactly playing at the moment? They seem to be continuing testing central banks. Like, how steep of a yield curve is it okay?
They can test us as much as they want. We have a mandate, we have an aim. We're going to be riveted to that, and we're going to do what is required in order to deliver on that. And we have exceptional circumstances to deal with at the moment, and we have exceptional tools to use at the moment, and a battery of those. And we will use them as and when needed in order to, as I said, deliver on our mandate and deliver on our pledge to the economy.
Madame Lagarde is basically taking on the bond vigilantes and saying, bring it on. If you want to push yields higher, do your worst. Let's see what you can do. And again, this basically comes back to their view, which is essentially version of yield curve control. It's not implicit, but they're basically doing it, where they're going to continue to suppress interest rates. And so all you have to do is look at, for example, the German Bund market. This past week, German Bunds, when adjusted for inflation, so the real return on the 10-year German Bund is negative 2%. Negative 2% on a 10-year German bond. So you tie up your money for 10 years, you will get a guaranteed return of negative 2%. Now, German bonds have been negative real returns for 59 straight months. That's almost 5 years. And so you can imagine the misallocation of capital when you basically eliminate the bond market and you eliminate price discovery. And so now we wind back here into Canada, where again, we're basically importing the ECB's monetary policy along with the Fed. And so when everybody's hammering rates down to zero and doing all this money printing, crazy things happen. And so all you have to do is look at the Canadian housing market today, and it becomes very easy to explain, at least to people that are paying attention to this channel. And the reality is I don't think anything is going to change. I certainly think that the markets are going to test it, and maybe central banks will eventually lose control, and then we'll have a real problem and some sort of monetary reset. But until that time, again, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And so all we have to do is look at Tiff Macklem's comments at the Bank of Canada this past week, coming out and saying in an interview with the National Post, saying, well, monetary policy is a blunt tool, and it's not just because house prices are out of control. It's essentially not our responsibility. And so but the thing is, nobody wants to take responsibility. All we have to do, again, take a global perspective and look what every other country that's grappling also with, record unaffordability, high house prices, etc. We can see just this past week, for example, we had the Australian central bank that had come out and said, well, house prices aren't in our mandate, so not our problem. You then had the Australian banking regulator said, not our problem either. So whose problem is it? And then you go over to New Zealand. New Zealand's central bank says, hey, again, not our problem. If we start hiking rates because housing is going up, that's going to decimate our export market. So it goes on and on and on. And, you can look here in Canada, what happens is the Bank of Canada says, hey, not our fault. OSFI, the banking regulator here, says, well, certainly not our problem. CMHC, whose mandate is affordable housing for Canadians, that's literally their mandate, have clearly failed in that regard. Locally, municipally, you have municipal governments which continue to basically stifle new housing supply. The process of approving new housing supply is absolutely egregious here. And so every level of government is saying, whoa, geez, man, it's that guy's problem. Because nobody wants to be responsible for bursting, the housing bubble. Nobody wants to be responsible for, let's say a 20, 25, 30% drop in house prices and the amount of devastation that would bring on the overall economy as a result of it bringing everything else down with it. So everybody, at least in government, is essentially incentivized to keep the game going. And so you have to excuse me that I hate to be the bearer of bad news. While I think it's inevitable that we will have a mishap, I don't think that I'm overly optimistic we're going to solve the affordability problem anytime soon. And so this really comes down to a situation now where you have people taking unbelievable amounts of risk, including, taking on negative cash flows. And, actually, let's clip to an interview here just this past week with CIBC's Benjamin Tal on his view that negative cash flow condos in Toronto is fantastic. It makes sense.
We have a situation in which the rent that you get is basically more or less the same as the mortgage and the cost that you pay. So you're breaking even. But there are about 35 to 37% of investors that are actually in negative cash flow. They are actually losing money on a monthly basis. Some of them a lot. Some of them more than $600-700 a month. And the question is why? As you can see from this chart, there is a significant portion that is negative cash flow. And we ask them, and they say, no, you don't understand. We are not losing money. Somebody is paying a portion of our mortgage. Over time, the price of this property will rise, and we will be better off. I want my son, my daughter, to be able to live in Toronto 10 years from now. That's why we are doing it. And you know what? They are right.
So again, we now have this situation. I mean, I get these phone calls as well where, hey, I had this one guy call me this year in Vancouver. He goes, hey, I'm losing, sell my house here in East Vancouver. Oh, why do you want to sell? Well, I'm losing $3,000 a month on the rental, and doesn't cover the mortgage. $3,000, Jesus, buddy. Like when did you think that was a good idea? He goes, well, it wasn't too bad before. Pre-COVID, I was only losing $2,000 a month, but one of the tenants stopped paying, so now it's $3,000. Holy smokes! But again, this is some of the behavior that we've obviously encouraged when you eliminate when you eliminate the savings vehicle, when you eliminate the bond market, when you take savings accounts and GICs down to zero. This is the behavior that we have obviously gone and created. So we can look at it today is there doesn't seem to be any sort of end in sight. I mean, Greater Vancouver home sales this for March hit record highs, all-time record highs. So March 2021 surpassed the previous highs that we set back in 2016. But again, you have to factor in the fact that we don't have any real underlying fundamentals today. At least in 2016, you could say, well, hey, there was a lot of offshore money coming in. We had low unemployment. We had pretty strong, almost record population growth. We weren't really overly building a whole lot in 2016. So fundamentally, you could make an argument that prices should be going up. Today, again, you just basically have, in my opinion, currency manipulation, which is pushing asset prices higher. So, but I will do a video in the next couple days for all you people that want a deep dive on the Vancouver housing market. As promised, I will do one of those per month where we will dissect the Vancouver housing market in depth. And so, but overall, my thesis and view for this week, to summarize, is that I think financial repression again is here to stay. I think that while I think a correction is probable at some point here, I don't think the affordability picture is going to get solved in any meaningful way. And I actually believe that real estate outside of cities like Vancouver and Toronto is actually going to be where you're going to see most of the growth moving forward. Not because people want to leave Vancouver and Toronto, but because they're going to have to leave. And that, unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Don't shoot the messenger. But I think that that's where the data stacks up. We're going to see people have to start making decisions, particularly the younger generation, that you got screwed. If you want to start a family and have kids, etc., you're going to have to leave, particularly those two cities, and you're going to have to go further out. And I think Alberta, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, the areas that have been largely neglected, I think will actually do fairly well moving forward. Similar to if you look at what's happening in the United States, you have a scenario where everybody's leaving the high house prices, high taxed states. So California is seeing outflows. You have outflows out of New York, and everybody's moving into Texas, Nashville, Arizona, and the like. So that's all I got this week. As always, smash the thumbs up button, like, subscribe. Look for that Vancouver real estate video, and we'll see you next week.